The coronavirus pandemic has had a direct impact on food security. According to research that's been conducted by Ask Afrika, 1 in 3 adults going to bed hungry. A third of people are also no longer able to pay their rent due to the lockdown. Well, for more on this and other findings, we are joined now this morning via Skype by Andrea Rademeyer, the chief executive of the research company Ask Afrika. Ms. Rademeyer, good morning and thank you very much for your time. I guess one would say because people are not employed and because people have been losing income and people are locked down, the findings are not surprising, or am I wrong?
I agree with you. The findings are as such not surprising, but I think the severity of them is surprising to me. Before COVID or before lockdown, we had 9% food insecure households, and that shot up to about 30%. And that, of course, is a huge concern. And if we look at how the numbers are increasing, they just seem to be spiraling in the wrong direction.
Now you said you did this. I saw the statement Ask Afrika has issued about this. You did it during a 6-week period where you use a 10-minute questionnaire in English asking certain households. Was that across the country, or was it in a particular province, or was it in metros?
Yes, Dan. No, we've done this across the country. We've made sure that every week, because every week is a different survey looking at a different topic, and every week represents the entire country. So we've been able to track how different provinces have been managing throughout lockdown per week. And there have, of course, been quite significant changes. So at the moment, Mpumalanga is really struggling. And we can look at this from various perspectives. From a financial distress perspective, where we can see Mpumalanga and Northwest are struggling the most, and hunger as well. We see Mpumalanga, Limpopo and Northwest struggling most. From an emotional perspective, it's Northwest. And from an overall managing perspective, it's interesting to see again that Mpumalanga are struggling most. They're giving us the worst ratings, whereas the rest of the country seem to be settling into the concept of lockdown, but Northwest and Northern Cape are amber. So I think if things don't change, they're going to start severely struggling as well.
You asked the participants a number of questions, a range of issues coming up. Can I start the one about schooling? Because it will be top of mind for many parents this week after the Basic Education Minister, Angie Motshekga, announced earlier this week that the schools for grade 7s and grade 12s will resume on the 1st of June. What did you find? What is a survey telling? What are parents concerned about when it comes to issues of schooling and children being at home?
So it's quite a complex issue, like so many others. And if you look at all the data, it's quite clear that parents themselves are pretty torn about this, because 44% say they don't think the schools are ready to actually receive scholars, but even so, they desperately want to go back to work. But at the same time, they don't trust the childcare. So it's a host of different aspects. We also saw that only 30% of parents actually manage also teaching and making sure their kids get the schooling. So the parents are not managing with their children not being able to go to school. And in fact, 2/3 of all parents are saying this year might actually have to be repeated. They would support having the school year being repeated. And I linked that, Dan, to another question we asked. What support have parents been getting from schools? And 37% of parents said they had received no communication from their schools on how to teach their children or how to take their children through the curriculum. Now, if you consider that number alone, it's about 40% of our children that have lost 2 or 3 months of the year already. And so it's a host of concerning aspects to the whole schooling question.
I guess
it's not a simple one to answer.
Yeah, I guess you could put it's a huge dilemma for parents who, as you said, on the one hand, they want to go back to work, And some of them have childminders, some of them don't, child care facilities, and others want them to go to school, and others are saying, but 37% of them are saying, we never received anything during the lockdown from the school. We might as well write off the school year. That's very tough indeed. Okay, let's shift back to where we started, about hunger. And how are people, what are they telling you? How are households, those that you are talking to across the country, how are they coping? How are they managing to put food on the table, those who can?
So, Dan, we didn't ask them how they put food on the table, but we asked questions around that. So about half of all adults have simply reduced their number of meals and reduced the size of their meal. Now, that stands to reason that an adult would rather feed their child than themselves. But if you consider that it's half of all adults, this is a very high number. Some adults, also a third of them, just go for a whole day without food. We've also seen that 29% of children go to bed hungry. So that's a concern. There are different aspects to the food question. We also asked about food parcels. Now, again, about 44% of all respondents said they had not seen any food parcels or being handed out to vulnerable communities around them. So even though huge efforts are made by government and NGOs to get food to the communities, it's still not enough. And we've got 72% of all respondents saying that they're actively concerned about their livelihoods. That's an enormously high number.
Yeah, and I mean, that will speak to a number of issues that you've also covered. And very briefly, if you could summarize under the big umbrella of fear of COVID-19, because we are stressed, we are distressed, as you've said, that's what you're finding out financially. There's a lot of anxiety about our kids going back to school and how we're going to manage. And there's unemployment is rising, and we actually don't know what the future holds. What did your survey tell you about our state of emotional well-being, the emotional health of the respondents? Did you ask them anything about that?
Quite a bit, Dan, because we thought it's an aspect which has gone unnoticed thus far. And to give you a number, at the beginning of lockdown, as I told you initially, we've been measuring this on a weekly basis. So 7 weeks ago, 56% of all our citizens said they were managing. That number has dropped to 25%. It's very low. And if we look at the specific questions around anxiety and depression, a very high number of people are getting depressed and very anxious. But what concerns me when we look at the different age groups, our youth is suffering most. So the older generations, particularly the ones above 65, are actually doing very well and have a greater sense of managing, have less anxiety, less depression, but our youth is very concerned. I think it also can be taken back to the schooling, because half of all youth said they don't feel happy with the way schooling has been happening during lockdown, and they would prefer to repeat the year. When we look at, and that's the 18-year-olds, if we look at 19-year-olds, it's 2/3 that say, let's repeat this year. So the youth are very anxious about the current state of lockdown and their future.
Oh, thank you very much for your time with those, sharing us those insights. That's the Chief Executive Officer of research company Ask Afrika.